Welcome to Humanities Montana's virtual Montana Conversations program. Today we are featuring Montana's former poet laureate, Lowell Jaeger, for our series Shelter in Poetry. Lowell was poet laureate from 2017 to 2019 and traveled all over Montana sharing poetry. Today he'll tell us how he's turning to poetry now and what poems are meaningful as we all shelter in place. So have you turned to poetry? Was that a thing that I assume that would be kind of a natural place for you to go when this started happening.
Well, this is a funny experience, I think, for all of us, but, because it's people are saying these are such weird times, right? And it forces us, I think, to sort of step outside of our normal and see what else is there. And, the act of writing poetry is always where you sit back and go into yourself and, you kind of pull away from the rest of the world for a moment in order to re-engage later on in a new light, in a new perspective. And so, like, I always joke that I'm sitting in the chair downstairs writing, and I've got my pen in hand, and I'm staring off into space, and my wife walks by, and she says, "Oh, excuse me, you're working." But it's really true. And, what I see happening during this crisis now is that, people are pulling inside some, and they're doing some reflecting and some thinking and some looking at the world in ways they really never have before, because this is a kind of outside the box experience. And we're learning about ourselves. We're learning about our interconnectedness. We're learning, lots of new things that wouldn't have happened otherwise. We're learning something about fear. And I've chosen two poems that I wrote recently. We were in Mexico City and Oaxaca just before this whole thing broke. And ironically, I was sort of thinking along these lines already about hope and fear. And in class, oftentimes I'm telling the students, students will say, "Well, I can't decide how I feel about this." I say, "Good, that's good. You don't have to decide. You're going to feel that you're a jumble of stuff, that we are internally confused. We have contrary voices always sort of talking to us. And that's sort of, in those moments, that's embracing the complexity of what it means to be alive. When we try to narrow it down to I am this or I am that, then we're really denying part of what is life. And in these two poems that I'll read, one you can see is this moment of hope for all humanity, and oh, what fun that was to write, and how good I felt, And then the next one was written a week later. The first one's in Mexico City, the second one's in Oaxaca. And the second one in Oaxaca is a beautiful place and has equally wonderful humanity. And yet I'm despairing of this experience of watching this beggar kid. And so here I am, a person who's experiencing both hope and despair, not one or the other, but both, And so am I right or am I wrong in experiencing hope? Or am I right or am I wrong in experiencing despair? I don't think there is a right and a wrong. It's just experience. It's the human experience. And we do both. And we have times of each. And so in this crisis, like my wife and I, with this virus thing going on now, oftentimes, we go through these cycles of today we feel good and we're doing well. And then the next day we go, oh, today we're not doing so good and we're not feeling so well, Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my thought there.
Yeah.
Read the poems?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the first one's called En la calle el Espíritu Santo. En la Ciudad de Mexico, arisen atop remnant stone carvings of Teotihuacan, millions of souls amassed this morn in the streets and walkways, millions here, and a galaxy of eyes twinkling elsewhere, exchanging besos y abrazos, milling shoulder to shoulder, beehiving in and out of El Mercado, offering smiles and miracles of small courtesies. The salvation of goodness persists. Grandmother, take my arm, please, and I'll escort you. Let's admire los niños launching balloons sunward, laughing and chasing fountain spray. In church, only a boy, I wandered aloud about the Holy Spirit and joked about the Holy Spook. It's an understanding one must grow into. And today, witnessing the flow, strangers respecting strangers, let's praise how we manage to care for one another, mostly, the grand body of our collective being making its way amicably. So you can see the hope there. That's this moment of epiphany, En la calle el Espíritu Santo, in the streets the Holy Spirit. And this poem taught me, in writing a poem, oftentimes, I don't have these grand thoughts. Language brings them to me. But I realized in writing this that I'd heard this term, the Holy Spirit, and I always sort of joked about it and didn't know what on earth that could mean. But then suddenly when you see in a place like Mexico City, 30 million people, and you see that, the vast, vast majority of people manage to live so closely, so peacefully, and so in such a humane manner, helping each other out, it just gave me this moment of saying, well, that's a kind of spirit that's sacred. It's a sacred spirit that we try to get along with one another. Sad thing is, the people who violate that spirit are the ones we often hear about in the news, etc. So that's my hope, right? I'm hopeful there. All right. So a week later, we're in Oaxaca, and it's equally beautiful. And sometimes, just what a wonderful place. And my wife and I are at this restaurant, and we had seen this beggar kid who was just shockingly destitute. We had seen him over the time we'd been there for a while. And my wife, at one point, we're sitting at this restaurant, and she says to me, "No más, por favor. No more, please. No more, please." And so the title of this poem is "No More, Please." "No más, por favor," my wife pleads, her heart leaking sorrow when I speak of the beggar boy, wraith in rags, who now has gained a station inside us, even as he patrols for handouts on streets nowhere nearby. He's stained our long-awaited getaway, our just respite. After decades, I've exhausted my reserves in the classroom, aiding succeeding generations to rise. My wife, too, confused and weary, having chipped away most of her talents in the name of collective public good. We've saved assiduously to purchase escape, scheming to hide inside the hype of travel brochure paradise. While over the past weeks, the beggar boy has reshaped us, painfully more wise. No se puede hacer nada. Can nothing be done? I ask the restaurant boss when I spy the beggar boy ascending, plying once again the force of his desperation. My wife pushes aside her plate of tamales, uneaten, as the restaurant boss hammers with a broomstick the beggar boy's back and shoulders, sending him hunched and stumbling. "Mal hombre," says the boss, returning, storing his cudgel in a corner shadowed from view. I'm puzzled if he's misunderstood my insufficient Spanish, or within my question he'd comprehended a request. He's smiling, though flushed, his jaw twisted, snarling. So you can hear the real different tone there. And the lesson for me and all that really was that that's life. These contrary moments of realization. And for me, they became these two poems. So sheltering in place, here's the first place to go, I think. Here's, in heart and the mind, shelter there. And this is a good time for some real reflection and some growth. And so, Humanities Montana, thank you for doing this thing. I think you're champions in trying to get people to do exactly that. so difficult for people. Yeah, I hear all our friends and everybody saying, "What do I do? I've learned, first of all, I'm kind of almost addicted to my routine, to my normal, and now I can't do that. What do I do? Sit in place and read and think and tune into Humanities Montana."
Thanks. Thanks for the plug.